Today on the show, we have fried green tomatoes from 1991 and steel magnolias from 1989. Check it out. All right, everyone. Welcome to Brandon at Random Reviews. I am your host, Brandon Griffiths. Thank you for stopping by. I do appreciate it. Today on the show, as I mentioned, we've got a couple of chick flicks. They were suggested by my one and only sister, who is our guest today. My first ever guest. What an exciting time. Say hi, Michelle.
Very happy to be here, Brandon.
I'm so glad to hear it. Okay, so recently you visited the great state of Michigan very briefly. What's the scoop on you coming to Michigan and you having people visit from out of town? Like what are your likes and do not likes?
Well, because both my husband and I are from Michigan, and going back means that everyone wants to see us at the same time, it makes it a little bit complicated. So both of our parents are divorced and they live in different locations in the state. Then we have other family and friends that we want to see or want to see us, and it makes it very stressful. So that means we don't come as often as we'd like to. And the recent trip we made was for my mother-in-law's wedding. So that was, pretty specific reason for us to come back to Michigan. So we didn't, have a lot of other plans.
Right.
But when we come back for the holidays and stuff like that, like we have to kind of limit the time that we're there, because if we were there longer, like it
just be like an ongoing, just constantly visiting everybody and stuff like
and
that.
then people we haven't seen in a while who, want to see us, or, different things like that. So the last summer, what we did was we had a party at your house and just said, hey, we're going to be here during this time. If you want to see us, come here to see us, so that we didn't have to, kind of try to make the rounds in the short amount of time that we are
actually in town.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought that party like went really well. Like I thought that was it was perfect for what you were looking for, because it's like everybody could come and visit and sit down with you. It was only like 4 or 5 hours maybe.
Yeah.
And if people wanted to come see you, it was kind of like they couldn't do the thing where they kind of put the ball in your court and make you say, hey, you should stop and see me sometime if I'm, if you're in town and, all that
Right.
stuff. Because I mean, that gets to be just very tedious. What about when, so obviously Christmas is a hassle. You gotta do all this stuff with the like gifts and things like that. If you don't plan, like what we've been doing the last few years is sending stuff. We'll buy stuff on Amazon and we'll just send it directly to who we're buying it for.
Except that our families can't really understand how to do that. It's only us that.
Oh yeah, it really is. I mean, mom did an okay job with that. She didn't seem to have too hard of a time, but it's so foreign to people. They feel like their shipping address has to match their billing address or something, I guess. Right. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't really have to be like that.
Well, or that the name has to, right? Like,
right.
I have to send this to Michelle because she's the one receiving it. And it's like, well, no, it can go to whoever the hell you want it to.
Right, exactly. And it's like, I mean, my big thing with that whole thing is like, we don't need to be wrapping these gifts. You know what I mean? Like we should be putting, who we're going to send it to. Like I would send it to Dan if it was for you, which is her husband, by the way. And I would not have any expectations that you guys are going to wrap those gifts. But I know you guys were doing that last year. And it's like, to me, it's like, it's a box. We don't need to bring
Well,
wrapping
but
paper into this.
you consider like it's not always a box, right? It comes in like the envelopes or whatever. And then my obsessive compulsive self cannot just have a bunch of random packages under my tree. I need things to look nicer
Oh,
than that. So that was part of it too. And I think if I remember correctly, mom would put something of like, she would address it to me, but would say Christmas gifts or something like that. So it would say
right,
Michelle Christmas gifts. And that I knew that it was for me and I shouldn't open it. But our dad's wife, she didn't get it. And so there was something she sent me and I was like, what? And it was addressed to me. And I mean, I think the difference is people don't understand that I get 10 Amazon packages a week.
right,
So if I get something addressed to me from Amazon, I'm assuming it's something I've ordered. So I opened it and I was like, well, I didn't order this. And then they were like, oh yeah, that was us, because I couldn't figure out who had sent it because
right,
it didn't match your protocol or mom's protocol. So I was like, okay, well, maybe it's Dan's mom or maybe it's Dad and Amanda. And yeah, finally figured out it was Dad and Amanda, which I am using the coffee cup that they got me right here, right now. So
Oh, well, that's
at
exciting.
least.
That's good. So I mean, it's like we did that. We did all we started, I should say, doing that with the giving of gifts and like sending it through Amazon and trying that out and seeing what we need to do to make that work. And I mean, like you said, like I get packages like all of a sudden, like do you get like the daily digest from USPS of like what your
I
mail is going to
don't
be?
know. I did for a minute, but maybe I think when we moved, it stopped and I never started it again.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because it was, I mean, I get that. And it's like, I will get something and it'll say it in the packages. And I'm like, what in fuck's name is this? And I like look at it and it's like, it's got some merchant name on it that is like clearly an alias of where I actually bought it from. So it's like harder to figure out? So it's like, I have to Google, like, what is this? This seller, what did they sell me basically, and try
Right.
and do some like detective work apparently. So it's like I was getting packages and it's just like I opened a few packages because I didn't even realize it. And then like half the time the Amazon guy delivers packages to the wrong house. And I'm like, the people down the street will open the package without even looking at the name on it, which I know I do. Like if I'm expecting a package, especially, it's
Yep.
like
Yep.
there's one sitting on my front doorstep, I'm just gonna open it. And so I've had them come down a couple of times and say, "Hey, we got this. Sorry, we opened it up." And it's so funny because every time that they've gotten something, they've opened it and it's been like some Batman thing. And it's like they just always kind of give me this look like, who is this guy? Like what is his
Well, we have the problem with the two of us, and we have, separate Amazon accounts. Like they're under one account, but we have separate profiles. And so a lot of times, and this hasn't happened as much lately, but I would be expecting something, not look at the name, open it up. And like there were a couple of times where it was a gift for me or,
right.
something like that, but it was actually addressed to Dan. So that was problematic. I know you're a big gift giver anyway, so that's
Yeah.
something that's like pretty important to you. So
Well,
whereas
like, sorry to interrupt, but like perfect example of that. Like last year, I was getting gifts for Dan, and I had already lined up what I was going to get him. It was like all stuff from his wish list because I couldn't really think of much that I wanted, like that I knew of that he would like. And that's the problem is I never know what you guys have that I don't need to buy for you because you've already got it. But it's like I like was gonna get him all these gifts for his wish list, and then Dad stopped me and was like, "Hey, do you have any ideas for Dan?" And I'm
oh,
like,
right.
"Okay." So like I had to switch, and Dad did not understand. I was like, "No, no, Dad, these are thoughtful gifts that I'm getting for Dan. The gifts that you're gonna be getting Dan are the gifts from his wish list. Like that's, I'm sorry to tell you, that's what that means." And he was not wrapping his head around it at all.
Right,
So
because you were just literally buying things off from Dan's Amazon wish list that Dan was putting on there to placate everybody who asks for lists because they don't know what to get him. He
right.
hates that. He
Oh, he
hates making
does. I
lists,
know.
and
Absolutely.
he wants you to find something that is really going to speak to you. But that's also bit him in the ass in the past too, because he was getting really annoyed that all we were doing, this was like, I don't know, 5 or 7 years ago or something. He was getting really annoyed that we were just looking at our phones all the time. And
Mhm.
so he got both of us Nintendo DSs, and to like be able to play games together looking at a little glowing screen instead of just looking at our phones all the time separately. The
Right.
problem is that I've never really played video games. I played GoldenEye on N64 and a little bit of Halo. That was about the extent of it. And that was about, a few hours total. So
Right.
the video game, like, I don't know how to play video games. So like he got me a couple of games, and then he got a couple of games that like we could play together. But like I literally don't know the functionality of a console. Like I don't know what buttons to push. I don't know where I'm going. Like, unless it's Super Mario Brothers or something like that, like I'm pretty inept, and even then I'm not good. So those sat in, like, we used them for a couple of weeks, and then they sat in drawers, and then he ended up, I think, eBaying them or something. So that's one of those times where I would have rathered he just get me something from my list than try to
Right.
get
Try and
something that,
surprise you with
yeah.
something you really like. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of problematic. I mean, like that is the hard thing with Dan is I know that about him. So it's like, I want to try and not get things off of his list. But at the same time, I think like last year I was swamped or so. Like, I don't know what I was doing, but I was like, I couldn't think of anything. And I was like, screw it. I got to get him something. And I kind of want to get this shopping over with. So it's like, why not just get him what's on his list? And at least I know he'll have some enjoyment of it. But hey, I guess we should probably get to talking about some movies here. So, first things first is Fried Green Tomatoes from December 27th, 1991, directed by John Avnet. And he made a few movies that I've seen very few of them, but The War, Up Close and Personal, Red Corner, 88 Minutes, which I have seen, Righteous Kill, which I have seen, and Three Christs, which I have not heard of ever. Have you heard of any of those ones, Michelle?
Up close and personal, I have.
That is a
Oh,
familiar name, but it's yeah. I mean, like I was just wondering if maybe you'd seen any of them, but
nope, not at all.
okay. So, writer of this story was Fannie Flagg, who actually authored the novel, and also Carrie Sobieski. Some notable movies by Carrie Sobieski are Annie from 1982, The Toy, which I know that movie, but I cannot think for the life of me who is in that. Like, who's the star of that movie? Apparently, there was a Born Identity TV movie from 1988 that I had forgotten all about. And she did that. And she did Sarah Plain and Tall, which I believe is the Glenn Close one
Yep.
with Christopher Walken. Okay. So,
But that's all Carrie Sobieski, not
right, right.
okay.
Yeah, so I didn't really get into because like Fannie Flagg, she was the author, so I figured it was better to go with what the screenwriter was doing.
Yeah.
I mean, what are some of the other books that Fannie Flagg has done?
It's not a ton that people would have really heard of.
Okay,
Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe, I think, was her kind of bigger one, but I think it was probably bigger after the movie.
right,
She does a lot of those sorts of books set in the South with strong protagonists, different things like that. So I mean, there are a handful. They're all okay. I think some are better than others, but I've read a lot of them now after starting with Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe, which is the name of the book.
right. Okay, yeah. And that I knew that. I mean, I knew like I didn't know if any others had been made into movies, and I assumed not.
I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like it, but we've got producer, and I only mention producers when they really have some standout movies. Jordan Kerner produced this movie,
Yeah,
and
he's got some standouts.
he made all of the Mighty Ducks movies. He made George of the Jungle with Brendan Fraser and Leslie Mann. Inspector Gadget with Matthew Broderick, Snow Dogs with Cuba Gooding Jr., and The Smurfs, the computer animated one from, I don't know, 10 plus years ago. Probably 15 now, if I really think about how long it's been since things have happened. Also, the score of this movie, I really actually enjoy the score.
Me
It
too.
doesn't feel out like it's not at all like every once in a while I'll hear a score that's just it doesn't fit like it needs to, you know? It's just like it just doesn't resonate with me. And so Thomas Newman, he made or he did the scores for The Player, Shawshank Redemption, Cinderella Man, American Beauty, The Green Mile, Finding Nemo, Skyfall, Spectre, and 1917. I have to say, I don't know about The Player. I've seen The Player before. It wasn't that great.
I
But
don't
like the
know
rest
anything
of these
about that.
movers, I think it's Tim Robbins was in it.
Oh, okay.
It was not a particularly great movie. It was just, I mean, it's about a guy who's a player as far as I remember, and it just doesn't really do much for me. But the last, like, did you guys ever watch 1917?
No, we never did.
Oh my goodness, so good. I love it. It's like one of those movies that's shot to make it look like it's one continuous tracking
Oh,
shot.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so it's very cool to watch, and it's very intense. It's just super interesting. And okay, so getting onto the cast,
Well, hold
we have
on. I want to
hold
hold on.
on.
Let me talk about this score a little bit because I actually made
Yeah.
a specific note that there's something with the score that I think really helps you kind of understand the plot of the movie.
Okay.
And does a good job of that. What I also find interesting about the soundtrack is that the soundtrack for the historical parts of the movie where we go back in time and hear about the characters in the past just seem to really like elicit like when there's one song that's like the lyrics are cool down and everyone is sweaty and disgusting and you can just think of like the Alabama heat in August and how
Oh yeah.
miserable that must have been in the 30s pre-air conditioning and like it just gives you that feeling. So I just wanted to note that I think good job on the score soundtrack there to kind of elicit that feeling from.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree. So wait, is that your note for it, or did you
That's
have more
my
notes?
nope.
Okay. All right. So cast, we have the one and only Kathy Bates. By the way, she plays Evelyn Couch. She was in Dick Tracy, Misery, North, which we saw in theaters, if I recall correctly.
Right, because Reba McEntire was in it.
Because Reba McEntire was in it. Michelle is a lifelong Reba McEntire fan, and she used to be crazy Reba Mc,
I
like
was I was almost Batman level.
almost Batman level that I am. So, and then she was in Titanic, which I had forgotten she was even in Titanic at all. And then The Water Boy with Adam Sandler. About Schmidt, I have 4 asterisks by that title. Can you guess why, Michelle?
Does she play 4 characters?
She gets nude in that movie.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I remember that.
Yes.
I did.
So
I don't think I saw that, or if I did, I only have seen it once. But yeah, that was quite a thing.
yeah, absolutely. And then Revolutionary Road I've never seen, but it's got Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet just like in Titanic. So,
So one very important note to mention: she played the unsinkable Molly Brown in Titanic, which
okay.
that role was originally supposed to go to
I have
one and
no
only
idea.
Reba McEntire, but her schedule didn't allow, and so they recast with Kathy Bates.
Wow, that's shocking. Oh
Yep.
my goodness. I would never have guessed Reba McEntire at all. I mean, even though we
Yeah.
just talked about her, it was yeah.
But I mean,
So,
I think for me, the this is what's the problem about this cast. I guess maybe it's not a problem. Is that I for these people, this is the role that defines them for me, right? So like the only other Kathy Bates role that really I think about is Misery as kind of being
right.
high. Obviously, understanding she's been in a ton of things. She was in The Office. She's been in other shows and different things
Oh
like
yeah.
that. But like this is kind of the epitome of most of the 4 main characters
Oh yeah.
the actors that play them for me.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's the thing is it's like I try and make sure that I figure out what people are in before, like obviously I look at the IMDb and the filmography and all that stuff, but like I'll look and try and find like what do I really think of when I think of that person? You know what I mean? What jumps out at me is like, "Oh yeah, right, they were in that movie. That's definitely what I think of." And I mean, it's tough to do because there's some that it's like I haven't seen the movies in so long that they're not fresh in my mind, so they just kind of skip on by. But then we have Mary Stuart Masterson, who plays Imogene Iggy Threadgood, and
To be more specific, it's Imogene Louise Threadgood.
my goodness, I'm a thousand apologies for that. I had not taken note of Louise, but okay. So she was in a movie that I've only ever heard of from the popular video board game Seen It, which is Benny and June with Johnny Depp,
Right.
and then The
Uh,
Postman. What? Oh,
you missed one, and this is very important.
okay.
She was in Bed of Roses with Christian Slater, which was a terrible movie. The only reason I know about that is because our mom used to watch that quite regularly, but she was also in that.
Yeah, our mom used to watch these two quite regularly as well, and that would be why I have fried green tomatoes. I realized as I watched it through that I had seen every single scene of the movie in its entirety, and then I never saw the movie beginning to end. So it's like I caught the beginning one time, caught the middle another time, caught the middle
Right.
of the middle, it's like
Which is why I
holy
wanted
crap.
to talk about these because I knew you had seen both of them, but I
Right.
figured you probably hadn't really sat down and talked through both of them. And I figured, maybe your listeners may want to talk about something other than Rocky and Predator at some point.
Hey, I've covered so many. Oh my gosh. It's been all I tried to dabble. I tried to get into the Forrest Gump. I get into the Tom Hanks of it all. Everybody loves Tom Hanks.
That's true. That's true.
But anyway, she was also Mary Stuart Masterson was also in The Postman with Kevin Costner, which I've never seen, but I have heard based on many accounts that it is a horrible movie. And
So I think you know that I am not a huge Kevin Costner fan. He ranks right up
ditto.
there with Keanu Reeves for me, which I think you've mentioned in a previous
Yes, I have.
podcast. My I don't want to say dislike for Keanu Reeves. I just don't think he's a very good actor. Kevin Costner, I really like. For instance, what is the Yellowstone show? Like,
Oh
I've heard
yeah.
it's really, really good, but I don't want to dive into that because I
No.
don't really like Kevin Costner. So, like, everybody else is going to have to bring their A game to make up for him.
Right, exactly. That's the problem is it's like there are movies where I'll say that he's in that I'll say I don't like him and because of that I like the movie far less than I think I would.
Right.
It's like Dan, if I try and tell Dan that Kevin Costner is terrible, he gets really up in arms about Bull Durham and Field of Dreams and tries to tell me that they're amazing movies and all this. And I'm like, I'm not saying they're not amazing movies. I'm saying
It's
Kevin
in spite
Costner
of
weighs
Kevin
them down.
Costner. Yes.
Yeah. And it's
Like,
it,
think of how much better they would have been if they'd found somebody
exactly. And
else.
I could honestly, and I don't know, you haven't gotten to the episode yet, but and I'll spoil it for now, but because it won't go into details. But in my Uncle Buck episode, I go into all of the supposed actors that were supposed to be considered for Uncle Buck,
Mm.
and like I'll send them to you after we're done recording today, just so you can see how ridiculous the list of people supposedly was supposed to be. But it's like the movie came out in '89 and it had like
Right.
Jim Carrey on it.
Yeah. Who would have like been what, 17?
He was I looked it up. He was around, like he was doing stuff. But he was not known by any fucking buddy. He wasn't
Right.
even on In Loving Color yet. Like I was like nobody's considering him. Anyway,
Right.
I digress. So Mary Louise Parker plays Ruth Jameson, and she was in The Client, Boys on the Side, which is another one that mom watched
Yep.
incessantly.
Yep.
Red Dragon, which is that Hannibal Lecter movie with Ed Norton, I think. And then the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford on a quiet Monday afternoon while he was hanging a picture or some shit. That's what you get for naming a movie that. That's
Right.
what you get. I'm going to make fun of you. Okay, so and then she was really big in Weeds. Like that was her
Yeah.
huge role. I mean,
Yep.
I never saw the show, but I've always heard people say they really love it and they think it's just wonderful and that she's great in it and all this stuff.
She is one. I know you had this conversation about Ted Danson and Matthew Perry about are they attractive? This is Mary
Mhm.
Louise Parker. I think it kind of fits into that. Sometimes she's really attractive, other times she's
I
yeah,
could
what's
agree
going
because
on?
like I saw her on the covers of like, the DVD covers of Weeds seasons and she looked unbelievable. Like I couldn't believe
Yeah.
how good she looked and I didn't even realize it was her in the show. And then I looked it up, I'm like, "Are you shitting me? That chick from Fried Green Tomatoes is in this?"
Right.
Like, are you fucking kidding? So yeah, I mean, is there anything else like with Mary Stuart Masterson that, Mary
No,
Louise
no,
Parker would jump
I
out?
think Boys on the Side was the one that I was
Yeah.
thinking of, but, like, again, like, with her, Weeds, I think, is the one I think of with her now.
Right, exactly. And I mean, Boys in the Side, it stands out because let me just be forthcoming in saying our mother is a lesbian. She's a gay person. She always gravitated towards these movies that had this like these undertones and overtones of like, that lifestyle. So it's like I always whenever I see a movie, like I'm not even exaggerating. Anytime I see a movie that I don't know anything about and I dive into it and I watch it, I'll tell my mom about it if there's gay subject matter. I'll just say,
And I
"Yeah, I think
don't
you might
like
like that movie."
yeah, we're not laughing because it's funny, we're laughing because, she didn't come out until we were much older, but this was kind of the sort of stuff that was around our home, uh,
Right.
our entire lives.
Exactly. Yeah. So, all right. So, I have noted here that Jessica Tandy is our next cast member and she is chronically old. I mean, she's not with us anymore, I don't think, but
Oh.
no, she's not. But she is just like the epitome of an old lady in this movie. Like I can't get over how much like everything about her resonates that she's just super fucking old and it's kind of ridiculous. But she was in, she plays Ninny Threadgood, which I don't remember what her real name.
That's it. That's all you ever
Oh,
hear it
Ninny,
as,
okay.
and, I think that's all you ever hear it of, as in the book too.
Oh, okay. All right. So, she was in The Birds, which I probably wouldn't recognize her if I saw her in The
Yeah, I was gonna
Birds.
say I didn't know that.
She was in Cocoon, which I did know that because that was
Mhm.
from the 80s, so that would be more recent looking Jessica Tandy. And obviously, Driving Miss Daisy is the one that like people
Right.
think about when they hear Jessica Tandy. Did you have a plot synopsis for us by chance, or do you have more to talk about?
Before we go into the plot synopsis, I just
Mhm.
have to say that I wrote down the ages of the actors that were playing the characters, the 4 main characters.
Okay.
So Kathy Bates was 44 years old.
Okay.
Uh, that really disturbs me because she's only 5 years older than I am now, and she looks about 60 in this movie.
Yeah.
Jessica Tandy was playing an 82, 83-year-old. She was 83, so right on point. Good job. Mary Stuart Masterson was 26 and Mary Louise Parker was 28. They play younger and older versions of themselves. And I actually think they do a decent job of like making them seem younger, teenagers at one point and then, in their 30s later. The
Right.
other cast members I wanted to mention, Buddy Threadgood, played by Chris O'Donnell, obviously known by Brandon as
Mm,
Dick Grayson or Robin in Batman and Robin. Three
and Batman
Musketeers.
Forever. Hold
Oh,
on.
sorry.
Batman
Okay,
Forever was where he premiered.
got it.
Go ahead.
Three Musketeers. And then
Hmm.
he's been in NCIS LA for a while. He kind of had a huge hiatus for a while before he came back for that, from what I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, he hadn't been in anything that I could remember. I
Uh,
I'm going to say this, and I don't want to oversell it. Chris O'Donnell is a god fucking awful actor. I don't like him at all. Like I don't care for his acting, and it doesn't help the whole Batman, being
yeah,
Robin, all that stuff. Like the way the things they did in those movies were, it was bad. I mean, they didn't really have good writing, and
yeah.
then I'm sure the direction wasn't good enough to like say, "Hey, Chris, could we run that back? Could we do another take on that? Because that was the worst thing I've ever seen in my life." And they didn't do any of that. So anyway, I had to make it a point to say. And by the way, since you looked up Chris O'Donnell, did you by chance look up the Three Musketeers movie? Because I'm really curious to see if we can think of who was in that with him.
Oh, it was Gabriel Byrne was D'Artagnan.
No, no, you're thinking of
Oh,
the Man in Iron
that's
Mask.
Man on Iron Mask. Damn it.
Yeah,
It
I
was
think Kiefer Sutherland was in it.
Kiefer Sutherland. Wasn't it Charlie Sheen? And
Yes, that sounds about right.
there was another guy whose face I can see, but I don't know his name. Like, and I'm not sure I would know it otherwise because
Right.
Chris O'Donnell played D'Artagnan in that. Like, he was the remaining
Right,
guy.
right. Yeah, okay. So,
Then Mama Threadgood was played by Lois Smith, who I fondly know from Twister, which is one of my all-time guilty pleasure movies.
I think I noted that in my notes that she was that lady. That was what I
She's
know
been
her
in a
from.
lot, like a character actor in a lot of stuff,
Oh yeah.
as small parts. The one that I wanted to mention that I thought was really weird is Reverend Scroggins, who has, I mean, a part, but like not a huge part. It's played by a
Mm,
guy named Richard Reel, and he has 419 titles on IMDb. This
holy
guy has
shit.
been in so much shit and is still like he's got 3 credits just in 2022. He's just in stuff everywhere. I remember him from an episode of The Golden Girls, another major obsession of mine.
Of
Um,
course.
and then the 2 other characters I wanted to mention specifically were Missy, who is Evelyn's friend that she goes to all the weird classes with. Not seen her in anything else until Orange is the New Black. She
Okay.
was like the yoga teacher in that. I only watched the first couple of seasons because that really annoyed me. And then Frank Bennett, who is the villain in this, was played by a guy named Nick Cirrus, I think,
Okay.
which doesn't really matter as far as the guy's name, unfortunately, because this man will never be anyone other than Frank Bennett. He
Right.
plays the character so well. And it's so iconic that like I saw him in an episode of Justified with
Timothy
Timothy.
Oliphant. Yeah.
I think you mean Ola Fantastic. Um,
Oh, do I?
he
Yes.
but he's in that and he's like kind of a lighthearted character to juxtapose against Timothy Olyphant's character. And I'm like, I can't take him seriously. He needs to die.
Right.
He's a terrible person.
Right.
Um, so yeah.
Wow. Well, I mean, Richard Reel, I do know from Office Space. He plays the guy.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's one thing I do remember him from.
Yeah, he's in tons of stuff. All right, so this movie is kind of just give you a plot synopsis here. It focuses on 2 kind of parallel stories, one in the present time in the late 80s, early 90s in Alabama, with a middle aged woman who's kind of going through a bit of a crisis and befriends an old woman in a nursing home who starts telling her stories about these women from the same area in Alabama in the 20s and 30s. And the stories about those women kind of help support the Evelyn Couch, the middle aged woman in the present time, to kind of find her voice and improve her life. The kind of big thing in the past time is that one of the characters is abused and her husband is presumably murdered, and everyone thinks that her friend murdered her husband. And that's part of the kind of later plot is the murder of the husband who is Frank Bennett, who is a terrible, terrible human.
Right. As we have established, yes.
So
Okay.
the movie starts where you see Evelyn Couch and her husband Ed are lost in Whistle Stop, which is where the previous past content takes place. And one of my favorite lines in the movies is they're lost because Evelyn's giving directions and she messes them up, and her husband says, "Oh, you have a negative sense of direction," and I've used that on many occasions to describe something. They're visiting aunt's Aunt Vesta, Ed's Aunt Vesta, in a
Which
nursing home.
what kind of fucking name is Vesta, by the
It's
way?
very southern, right? Like some of these
Apparently.
names, you think of
Well,
some
we
of
haven't
this.
even gotten into the second movie yet. We'll talk about some fucking names in that
Yes, that's
movie.
true. That is true. So Vesta hates Evelyn. And so Evelyn goes and sits in kind of the seating area in the nursing home. And this old woman starts randomly talking to her. And what I thought was really funny about this is the sort of shit that I do that drives you crazy because I will talk to anyone at any time. So Minnie comes out and she says, "Oh, they took my gallbladder." And then she says, "Oh, have you ever had a fleet enema?" Like some really
Which by the
inappropriate, crazy
which by the
things.
way, total old lady things to say. Like
Absolutely.
absolutely, especially in a nursing home, it's like
Yes.
let's just latch onto this person and tell them about the gross shit that's been happening to my body and
But
they're
also, she is trying to get Evelyn's attention somehow. And what
right.
I think Kathy Bates does a really good job of kind of be like, she shows that she is trying to be this mild mannered, polite Southern woman who's sitting there and listening, but she's kind of giving one word answers. And
Right.
it's the like current that, "Oh, that's crazy" sort of thing, right? When you're trying to get somebody to shut up.
Right. Yes.
And but then Minnie gets her because she says, "Oh, does the name Idgie Threadgood ring a bell?" Evelyn says no, and she said, "Oh, you remember her?" And then she goes on to say something about, well, never would have thought that she'd be accused of killing that man, and she hooks Evelyn Couch.
Right. I mean, there's nothing else she could possibly be doing but trying to hook Evelyn Couch because it's just like, who else would start off a story that way? Who's like, oh yeah, never would have thought she'd have murdered a man, or like
Yeah,
something like that. It's like, yeah, that's just you're clearly like dying for an audience.
yeah, absolutely. So then she starts telling the story of Idgie Threadgood, and really the story from the past does focus on Idgie, but it's Idgie and Ruth. So what's really interesting is that in a lot of the notes on IMDb or Wikipedia or whatever, they talk about how the director didn't really want to establish this specifically as a lesbian relationship between the two of them, but there
Mm.
were some definite overtones there. Mary Stuart Masterson and Mary Louise Parker and Fanny Flagg all wanted it to go that direction. In rewatching it now, it's been a few years since I'd watched it. It's much more overt than I think I realized as a kid.
Oh yeah.
And I knew, right, like after I was older, that there were those kind of signals there. But everybody in everything I read was like, well, in the book it was much more overt, and I don't agree with that. I think it was, I don't know, it was there, but it was never specifically spelled out. Like it was that, they lived together and shared their life together and that sort of things. And they had a very, partnership, spousal kind of relationship, but it wasn't like it was spelled out that they were lovers or they were, a couple
Right.
specific.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean that's I find it strange because like I don't know, didn't they say Fanny Flagg was like she worked on this movie, right? It wasn't just based
Yeah.
on her book, and so I always find it interesting. Like I've seen a couple of movies where the author did the screenplay and basically elaborated on what the book couldn't basically without being
Mhm.
very obvious, and it's always really interesting because it's like it makes you wonder like how many of these books and stories out there are like they're missing pieces that would have really filled in some blanks.
Oh, well, this book, so this is really interesting. It's one of the few, places I will say it. You can, record this for history that the movie is better than the book, and I will explain why. Because the book has far more characters. It doesn't just focus on the Iggy Ruth relationship. It goes into far more of Evelyn and Ninny's backstory, which, you know, is helpful character development, but it doesn't really move the plot along. There's also a lot about Sipsy and Big George and their families. So much so that there are entire chapters devoted to, I think, Big George's sons or brothers and like them going away and stuff like that. And it's very, very different. So really the movie is only a piece of that. And I
Right.
think they do a good job. The other, you know, most of the things track the book, but for instance, you know, characters' ages change a little bit or things.
Naturally, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we go back to Whistle Stop through Ninny's story, and she says you've gotta understand Iggy through the eyes of her brother Buddy. Buddy is infatuated with Ruth, who is there visiting for the summer. And they're, you know, kind of kissy facing on the bridge, and Ruth's hat flies off, and Buddy gets his foot stuck in the train tracks and gets hit by a train and dies. And obviously, that like puts into motion kind of the rest of the
So,
movie.
so wait, hold on a second here. All right. So why is it when this scene unfolds, we see Chris O'Donnell get his foot stuck between the tracks and they show him
Yep.
struggling,
Yep.
and then they show him unlace his boots
Yep.
and remove the shoe and leave it in the track, and yet he still somehow dies. Like,
Well, but if you look at it, what drives me crazy, first of all, I don't understand how his foot got stuck because he literally had to like put his foot in there.
right.
Secondly, they when he gets his foot out, he should have dove to the right. If he, you know, looking at the train, he should have dove to the right
Right.
away from the tracks. And when what you see is him diving to the left in front of the train.
Right, right. It's as if he was sacrificing himself for the
Yeah.
story.
For
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So then the plot goes back to present times where Evelyn Couch, Kathy Bates' character, is trying to take all of these classes to improve her marriage because her husband's an asshole, and she's, I think, been, you know, a stay-at-home mom her entire marriage. Very indicative of kind of the times with, you know, you just got married and had kids at that point. You didn't really have your own life. Her kid has grown up and moved out of the house. She doesn't feel like she has any purpose. And she's trying to do all of these things. And the first scene that you see with them in a class, the woman teaching the class is actually Fanny Flagg.
Oh, okay.
And one thing that Missy, Evelyn's friend, says during this scene is that assertive Southern women, you know, it's a class for assertive Southern women, which is a contradiction in terms, which I thought was kind of
Mhm.
funny. And then we go back to the past. Evelyn goes to visit Ninny again, and this is where Iggy meets Frank Bennett for the first time, and she says he says something about, oh, you're looking mighty fine today, and she says, are you a politician or does lion just run in your family? And I think that's a good line. And during that time, so Ruth is there for the summer. Ruth learns that Iggy is a decent person. You know, they're throwing food to a tent city outside of town. The one thing I noted in that scene is that the caboose is 2 cars back from them. You'd be pretty sure that somebody would be in the caboose and seeing them throwing food and like put a stop to it. But
Right.
so lots of back and forth for a while with Ninny telling Evelyn the story. You know, you're kind of getting more understanding of the relationship between Ruth and Iggy. There's the scene where Iggy gets the honey out of the tree. And I think you've made note of this too, that Mary Stuart Masterson ended up doing all the stunts for the bees herself because the double quit like the day of.
Right.
And I said, Ruth calls Iggy, you're just a bee charmer. And I said, more like a Ruth charmer, because she's obviously, they're both
Yeah. Oh yeah.
smitten.
Most definitely. And there, I
So,
mean, this is the point where I made the note that there are definite lesbian themes in
yes,
Ruth and Iggy's relationship, whether they claimed it was there or not.
right.
Yeah.
So one thing that I remember seeing this movie not in the theater, but we were on a school shopping trip. My mom, me, and another one of my mom's friends and her daughters, and we were in a hotel. It was probably on HBO, and I think it was probably about a year after it came out or so because I wasn't too old. I was probably 10 or 11, but I was enthralled by it and like wanted to keep watching it, even though like I think they were trying to go to bed and stuff, and I was like, no, I want to finish this movie. So kind of has been part of my life since day one. So
So I mean, I have next Ruth and Frank Bennett get married.
yep.
Yep. And she moves away. And so they're, they it's pretty evident when they visit Ruth that something's been going on with, Frank abusing her in some fashion, mostly just physical abuse. You can see she has a shiner on her face.
Yeah, giant
And
giant black eye.
right.
She's trying to hide, and it's super awkward because here's like one of her best friends, and she won't even like open the door to like take the pie from her when Iggy comes to visit, and
Right.
like won't let her into the house.
Yeah, I
Weird.
mean, it's a very unsettling scene, and you just know that not good things are going to come of this.
So Ruth sends a letter. She sends a like within a few months, perhaps. We don't really know the timeline. With an obituary saying that Ruth's mother died,
Okay.
and she rips out a page from her Bible and she underlines a couple of lines from the book of Ruth, and it says, where thou goest I will go, where thou lodgest I will lodge, thy people shall be my people, which is a coded message to Iggy to say, I got to get out of here. Come get me. So
Right.
Iggy takes her older brother Julian, and Big George, and
Mhm.
goes to Valdosta, Georgia to pick up Ruth. They're packing everything up, and Frank Bennett comes back. And he starts to hit Ruth, and Iggy tries to attack him, and Julian and Big George come in and threaten Frank Bennett, and Frank Bennett, kicks Ruth down the stairs. And when they go to leave, Iggy says, if you ever come near her again, I'll kill you.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, the whole kicking down the stairs thing was pretty fucked up to watch. Like it was just like
Yeah.
holy shit cuz this guy
Well, and
knows.
yeah.
It's not like he's not aware, but
Well, and he probably doesn't know that she's pregnant at that point, but the audience does.
right, exactly. Yeah. I see I got the impression that he had to have known because when he came later on,
Well, if you see, there's a scene where you see him hiding out and watching them. I think
right.
that's how he knows that there's a baby.
Right.
I don't think he knew. I think that was like Ruth found out she was pregnant and she was like, oh shit, I can't be here anymore.
Right. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
So then we go back to Evelyn. She's doing more of her classes. This is the scene where they're in a room of little old Southern women, and they've all got hand mirrors in their hands, and the instructor asks them to straddle their mirrors so that they can look at their vaginas. And Evelyn kind of loses it. She goes and sees. She has an episode at the grocery store where some young guy treats her like shit, and she loses her shit and starts crying and whatever, and goes and talks to Ninny. And one of the things she's talking about, I hide candy bars all over the place and I just feel useless and yada yada. And she says, I can't even look at my own vagina. And Ninny says, well, now, honey, I can't help you with that, which I thought was great. But Ninny says, I think you're going through the change. You need to get some hormones and some stress tabs. And what I kind of realized from this rewatch was that Evelyn has literally nobody to support her.
No, not at all.
Her husband barely even gives her the time of day. Her
Oh
friend
yeah.
Missy, doesn't, she's around, but like even the
It
people
doesn't
who
seem
live in
like
the
she
troop,
really she doesn't really
yeah,
seem like she gets it,
no,
Like she
not at
doesn't.
all.
Yeah.
And so Ninny's like the first person that Evelyn's really had probably in her life, that's been supportive and, is kind of teaching her these lessons through the lens of Iggy and Ruth, being strong women 50 years before.
Right.
So then back in past times, kind of some more racially charged conversations where Grady Kilgore, who's the politician, a good friend of Iggy, is complaining about Iggy and Ruth serving to colored people outside the cafe that they own. And you can, definitely tell that Grady has some racist feelings, but he's also making a show of it for the other people in the cafe because he
Right.
doesn't want anybody to know that he sat down by the river and cried when the colored man that raised him died. And one of the best lines in the movie is when Sipsy, who is the cook at the cafe and has been, with the Threadgood family probably her entire life, says, oh, it don't make no kind of sense. Big ol' ox like Grady won't sit next to a colored child, but he eats eggs, shoot right out of a chicken's ass. Uh, and then this is right after this, I think, is when the KKK comes, which is actually Frank Bennett and all of his friends from Georgia, because he's really there to see Ruth and tell her she's going to come back. They are whipping Big George. And that kind of puts into play what's, that he's going to try to come back and take them in the future.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, basically, how long after this do we have that Frank does come back? I mean, it's not very long. I have it like next up in my notes is that he
Yeah, because I think
returns.
this is that it goes back to the point where Evelyn, the young women, pull into her parking spot. So she hits with her giant boat of a car. She hits their tiny
Oh, right.
VW Bug, and kind of like finally gets angry for the first time in her life. And that's when Ninny tells her the story of, well, part of the story of what happens to Frank Bennett. So we see Frank Bennett come back and he steals Ruth's baby, who is known as Buddy Threadgood Jr., which doesn't make any fucking sense whatsoever.
No, it really
But
doesn't. Not even a little
whatever.
bit.
I guess she wouldn't want him to be called Jameson or Bennett because then Frank would have known about it most
Right.
likely. But even so, very weird. So that
Yeah.
another like kind of lesbian undertone there because it's Iggy Threadgood if she's kind of the father figure, whatever. Okay. So he tries to take the baby. He gets hit in the head with a frying pan, but we don't see who does that. Then very shortly after that, a sheriff from Georgia comes over, starts asking questions, tells Iggy, I know who you are. I know you threatened to kill him. If we find a body, you're going to jail. And fast forward 5 years later, you want to talk about what happens to Buddy Jr.?
Um, honestly, I don't know if I can I didn't like take it down in my notes, but it's like he loses his arm, but I don't even remember how.
Well, they don't show much of it. One, because I think because it was a kid, they didn't want to
Right.
be super gruesome, and it's also like not a gruesome movie. But he's on the train tracks playing just like his namesake, Buddy Threadgood, that dies at
Right.
the beginning of the movie. Somehow he gets hit by the train, but he only loses his arm,
Right.
and they start calling him Stump because Iggy
Right.
says everyone's going to call him that anyway. We may as well be the first.
Right. And
So
then
go
oh
ahead.
yeah. And then I mean, it's around this time. I mean, doesn't Ruth talk to Iggy about leaving, about like how she'd be better off if everybody'd be better off if she
Oh,
just
yeah, yeah. So this
parted
actually like
ways.
right after Frank came by and saw the baby during the KKK scene. She tells Iggy
Okay.
this, and then the buddy losing his arm happens what was supposed to be 5 years later.
Okay.
But again, very relationship centric conversation there.
Oh, that's heard. I found my note. It says, Buddy loses an arm to a train, I guess. That's all I have.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then very shortly after that, Ruth gets sick. She gets cancer and she passes away, probably only in her, I guess, early 30s at the most. Probably not even that, because like I would imagine she's probably supposed to be 18 or 20 when she gets married. Maybe it's a couple years later she gets pregnant, and 5 years later, so she's probably in her late 20s at this point when she dies. Yeah, and I mean, I really hope, I know you try to be more spoiler free than this, but
Oh
I
no, I don't care.
really just think that 30-year-old movies, nobody has any excuse. Watch the movie before you listen to the podcast if you're concerned.
I can agree with that. So basically, I mean, where are we at right now? We're what's next?
So then I think Evelyn goes to visit Ninny, and they say the person in this room died. And
Right, and they
she
aren't
thinks,
saying who.
yep. And she thinks it's Ninny that died, but it's actually Mrs. Otis, who was Ninny's roommate. And
Mm.
they said, oh, Ninny went back home. She didn't have to be here. She was just here for Mrs. Otis's sake. And
And
so,
it's important to mention that earlier in the movie we learned that Ninny doesn't have a home anymore because it was condemned,
yep,
and that basically they tore it down
yep.
because it was too dangerous to live in.
Yeah, and nobody bothers to tell Ninny because she's in this home and they don't, really think about it. So Evelyn goes back to Whistle Stop and finds Ninny sitting in the middle of the road looking at where her house was supposed to be. And Evelyn already had decided she wanted Ninny to come live with her and Ed and would take care of her. Ed's not happy about this, but Evelyn's going to do it anyway. So
Right.
you find out then too that Mrs. Otis is Sipsy, the cook at the Whistle Stop Cafe, her sister,
Mm-hmm.
and then we learn that on Sipsy's deathbed, she tells Mrs. Otis and Ninny what really happened the night Frank Bennett died. Oh my God, we completely forgot about the entire trial.
We did forget about the trial. I thought you were glossing over it.
No, I wasn't intending to. So they do find Frank Bennett's car in the river, and that for some reason that means that Iggy and Big George get arrested for murder.
I guess, yeah.
I guess, right? That's how the law worked then. You find somebody's
Mhm.
car, you threaten to kill somebody once upon a time, but there's no other evidence of it, but you get arrested and taken to Georgia. So, they go through the trial. Iggy makes a couple of outlandish remarks to the prosecutor and almost gets in contempt of court. And Reverend Scroggins comes up and testifies on Iggy's behalf, which throughout the entire movie, they've been kind of enemies. But Reverend Scroggins comes up and says that both Iggy and Big George were at the 3-day long revival that the church has. And so they couldn't have murdered Frank Bennett.
Which
Now,
is clearly a 24-hour long, like every single day it's 24 hours of the
right,
church
right. And they
revival.
could never have gone anywhere and done
They didn't
anything.
even get a bathroom break. They didn't get anything.
No, but also and at the end of it, when the judge dismisses the case because he says, you don't have a body, you've got a testimony from a preacher that nobody's going to dispute. Like this case is dismissed. And Iggy comes up to Ruth afterward and says, I can't believe that the Reverend swore the oath on his own Bible. And Ruth says, well, if the judge had looked any closer, he'd have realized it was a copy of Moby Dick, because obviously Iggy knows he's lying because they weren't at the revival. They are not churchgoers,
No.
whatever. And Ruth apparently had promised the Reverend that Iggy would go to church from now on if he did this for her, which doesn't make any fucking sense whatsoever. I think what it's supposed to be is that the Reverend recognizes that Iggy is a decent person and did not kill Frank Bennett, or if she did, she was justified and should not go to jail for it, right? She was
Right.
protecting her friend who was being abused. He knows Ruth. He knows she's a good person and needed to get out of that situation. And, this was justifiable homicide at minimum. So maybe that's it. But I just thought that was really interesting.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, basically like we have it's like Sipsy killed him, right? Killed Frank Bennett.
Yeah. So,
I mean, she hit him with a frying pan and it killed him, or that.
uh, yeah, a cast iron
Yeah.
pan, because he comes and takes the baby. So basically what happens is you see this the repeat of the scene, but you see more of what happens. So
Right.
Sipsy and Smokey Lonesome. Smokey comes out and tries to get Frank from leaving. Sipsy hits him with a pan. It kills him because if you've ever picked up a cast iron pan, it's heavy, and she'd been lifting those things even though she was a tiny little woman, been lifting those things her entire life. And then you see a scene where Big George and Iggy are talking about it, and they're like, you can't, there's no way a jury would believe Smokey Lonesome, who's a, hobo drifter guy, or a black female cook.
Right.
So Big George and Iggy know that they will have to kind of take the blame if anything happens. And then you find out that to get rid of the body, they barbecued Frank Bennett. Big
Yes.
George runs the barbecue, and the Curtis Smoot, the
The
sheriff from,
Georgia lawman. Yeah.
yeah, the Georgia lawman, loves the barbecue and he keeps eating it. And Sipsy says to him, "Oh, the secret's in the sauce." So that's the tagline for the movie is, the secret's in the sauce, because I don't know that they actually fed him to people, but I bet that's,
Right.
at
Yeah,
least what they
it's
did
a
to get
lot
rid of
is
it.
left unknown. I mean, honestly, they don't even really confirm
Hmm.
that they did barbecue him. Like they do, but it's not like for sure. It's not like you see them butcher up a body or something.
Well, there is a scene where like Big George is like cutting up ribs and stuff like that, and so you're left to believe that's what he's doing.
Yeah,
But
that's true.
so we learn all of that, and then Evelyn tells Ninny, "Oh, come home with me." They look over, and on Ruth's grave is a jar of honey and a note, and you learn that Iggy is still alive. And there is, this drives me freaking crazy, is they try to kind of make it seem like Ninny is Iggy,
Yeah, they
which
do. It's
doesn't make
very
any sense.
confusing. Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't like that at all.
so in the book it's much more deliberate because there's scenes with Ninny as a younger person too. It's not just Ruth and Iggy and those few people, like Ninny is involved in that. But in this, like, she's married to Iggy's brother Cleo. That's how she's a Threadgood. She's got all this inside information because she was around. It's, yeah, just, it doesn't make sense,
Yeah.
and I don't know why they make it seem that way. I just think it was kind of poor direction.
Yeah. And so we get, basically the explanation of like the town being closed down because of, the train not coming by anymore and people just kind of, closing up shop and stuff. And I said that the reason the train probably stopped coming through was because of Iggy's malfeasance and just her tossing things off the train. It's probably not very profitable for that. So,
Yeah, I would
yeah.
assume.
But yeah, you know, some things. I mean, did you have anything else you want to talk about plot wise?
No, I think we've covered it in this hour
Okay.
long discussion.
Yeah, it has run a little long. We've still got another movie to do. How
I know.
exciting. So I like the simplicity of this story and like how it's like two simple stories combined into one more complex story, I guess is how I want to put it. And the echoing of one story within another,
Hmm.
it's really cool the way they do it. I of course love the accents. I'm a big accent man, if you know what I mean. And the music, as I mentioned, is fucking solid. The
Hmm.
scoring is amazing, and it's got a pretty satisfying ending, I would say.
Yeah.
It leaves you, you don't have a bad taste in your mouth or anything like that, or feeling like you wanted more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think acting stellar. Jessica Tandy won an Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. I looked it up, and I don't think any of the other three main actresses were nominated for Academy Awards, which I thought was surprising. I thought for Kathy Bates she would be. I can understand kind of the newness of Mary Stuart Masterson and Mary Louise Parker at that point. Maybe didn't warrant it. I
which
think it also won Best Adapted Screenplay.
which is
Which
why it's why the Academy Awards suck, though, because it's like a
right,
good performance is a good performance. Like, I don't need an established actress. If it's the first time I've ever seen her and she puts on an Academy Award winning performance, she
yeah,
deserves it.
yeah. I don't watch this movie a lot because it's tense, right? Like you mentioned simplicity. I actually think it's pretty complex in the undertones that it has with kind of the feminist aspects of Evelyn's journey, dealing with kind of a midlife crisis, with some of the kind of scenes in the nursing home where you can see people are kind of treated as afterthoughts once they're older, and then
Right.
obviously spousal abuse and lbgt themes throughout. So I think it kind of hits a lot of those things, and so it's kind of heavy in that respect, and I don't watch it as often because of that, because I don't need that kind of complexity in my life any more than my life already has.
That's fair. I could see that. My only criticism for the movie was that there was just like one or two slow spots where I was just kind of like, all right, what's going on now? Like, when's something gonna happen? Like, I don't know. Maybe
Oh,
it was
really?
just
What?
me. Yeah.
Yeah. What parts?
I guess like it's felt slow in the times between, like, when Ruth moves away,
Hmm.
and you keep getting Evelyn is dealing with Ed plopping down in his little easy
Yeah.
chair, and it's like maybe not slow, but it was just like, okay, I need something to happen with this, because like how long are we going to keep seeing this
Well, I
happening
think
where Ed's coming home? And
so. What I noticed in that, especially this last rewatch, and maybe it's because I'm older now and whatever, but like what I noticed is how in the reason those scenes I think are happening, especially with Ed and Evelyn, is to show Evelyn's change over time.
yeah,
Because as
that's
she
true.
says later in the movie, she said, I was taught not to get angry, it's bad manners. And you can see her over time, where at the beginning she's just kind of accepting it and it is what it is. And over time, it's like, damn it, this is not acceptable.
Yeah, right. Yeah, okay. I can appreciate that response. So I guess, I mean, did you have anything particularly negative that you noticed?
Nope, stellar, wonderful, amazing.
Okay. All right. So for casting notes, I have that Susan Sarandon was considered for the role of Evelyn Couch, which, by the way, IMDb, every fucking time I see you put was considered for the role, I have no idea what that means. Did they audition? Were they on a short list? Or were they just like a
Right.
name that got thrown out and like, what the fuck ever? Uma Thurman auditioned for the role of Iggy Threadgood, and if she would have gotten it, I don't know how that would have been. It would have been.
Mm-mm.
I'm not sure I would have been a fan of it, but I don't even know if she can do a Southern accent. That would have been the tipping point for me. Is if she couldn't do a Southern accent, I'd be like, get the
And
fuck out of
for
here.
this, and we'll talk a little bit about this too with the next movie, but like I thought everybody did pretty good accent. I mean, obviously I'm not from Alabama, so I can only, base this on movies or people I know, but
Well, it's like whenever I talk to you and how things just trail off all the time,
yeah.
and I just keep saying things. That's what I kept thinking every time with this movie. So some trivia. So Mary Stuart Masterson did all of the bee stunts herself because her double quit last minute, as we mentioned. Director John Avnet referred to Mary Louise Parker as Lou and Mary Stuart Masterson as Stu on the set because their names are so similar. He had to say them, and he had to say them so often. In wow,
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit, like where
yeah,
Mary Louise Parker, Mary Stuart Masterson, and Fanny Flagg all wanted to depict the lesbian relationship, but the director didn't want to. And the only thing he thinks he really did was the food fight was an analogy for a love scene.
Right.
But I honestly think that conversation we were talking about where Ruth is telling Iggy she thinks she needs to move on and leave and whatever, that's more of a specific, like, I don't know,
Right.
romantic sort of thing.
Oh yeah, for sure. In the special features on the DVD, the director states that Aretha Franklin's voice was dubbed into the soundtrack for the gospel singer in the church scene, which I was like, couldn't you just get somebody that could sing well
Also,
enough?
the
But like,
church scene is, I think, a deleted scene.
no, it's in there. At least the scene that they're talking about, the one where Evelyn and Ninny go.
Right, that was not in the original cut of the movie.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, that was on the cut you gave me.
Oh,
At
okay.
least
Well,
I
maybe
think.
I have,
Maybe no,
maybe
no. I watched it on something else. What the hell else did I watch it on?
there, you might have
Anyway,
watched the special features or something, because I'm pretty sure that was a deleted scene.
yeah. Okay. So the IMDb nugget of choice for today is Ed asks Evelyn how she could hit someone 6 times by accident, but she only rammed the red Volkswagen Bug 4 times. My goodness, I'm so glad that there are people out there,
Counting.
seeking justice, and they really want to make sure that people aren't,
Right.
fucking around with their numbers. Okay, info and ratings. Runtime 136 minutes, budget 11 million, worldwide gross 119.4 million, IMDb rating 7.7, Rotten Tomato critics score 75%, Rotten Tomato audience score 91%, personal rating 4.5 out of 5 stars. What do you think, Michelle?
I don't think I have to
Oh,
say
okay.
it.
You don't want to just say 5 out of
This is
5?
yeah, this is 5 out of 5 for me. I mean, these two movies I think are my two favorite movies of all time. So
Oh, wow. Okay.
yeah.
So I guess we should chug right along because we're at hour 23 of recording time or 1 hour and 23 minutes of recording time. Please don't get
Mhm.
that twisted. Okay. So Steel Magnolias came out on November 15th, 1989, directed by Herbert Ross, who also directed The Goodbye Girl, Footloose, which is a personal favorite movie of mine. I don't know why. I just love me some Footloose. My Blue Heaven, and
Never heard of
Boys
that.
on the Side with Connective Tissue. Oh, yeah. Boys on the Side, Mary Stuart Masterson, and this director, The Connective Tissue. Anyway, My
And
Blue Heaven
the
is.
Michelle and Brandon Griffiths sibling connection to our mom watching that movie all the damn time.
That's true. Yes, that is fair. My Blue Heaven is a movie with Steve Martin and I believe Rick Moranis. It,
Mm,
like a lot of Steve Martin movies, they're pretty hit and miss.
right.
Writer Robert Harling. Producer, no notable producers. Soundtrack score composed by Georges Delarue, which is a southern name if I've ever heard one. And or is it a southern name or is it like a
It
foreign name?
No, it's probably, it could be like Creole, right? Like the French Southern.
Oh, yes, yes. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. And then so our lead
Okay,
actress, go
hold on
ahead.
one thing. So the writer Robert Harling, this is he wrote the play that this movie came from, and it was based on his sister. So another sibling thing here. Brother wrote it about his sister. Uh Now brother has podcast, sisters on talking about said movie. So
Wow, so much connective tissue. I can't even handle it. Sally Field, who I'm going to be pointing out each and every one of these names individually. Malin Eatonton,
mhm.
okay? She was in Smokey and the Bandit, Norma Ray, Homeward Bound, Mrs. Doubtfire, Forrest Gump, The Amazing Spider-Man, and Lincoln.
She's also in Gidget, the TV show in the 60s, I think it was, and
Oh, The
uh,
Flying Nun.
The Flying Nun. And one of my friends in elementary school always said that I looked like a young Sally Field. I mean, I'll take it,
Eh,
whatever. Um,
yeah.
but I know you're going to probably go into this a little bit later, but this character's name is Malin, and that's M'Lynn.
Yes.
Don't
Just
understand.
I mean, what's it short for? It's not short for anything. It's just Malin. All right. So we've got Next up is Dolly Parton, who plays the character Truvy, Truvy Jones. She was in 9 to 5, The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, Straight Talk, and a personal favorite of mine called Rhinestone. Do you know what's so great about Rhinestone, Michelle?
I don't.
Rhinestone is a movie with Dolly Parton and Sylvester Stallone where
Oh, that's right. I
she
remember
teaches him
you.
how to sing, and he
That's
is.
right. And
By
he's a
the
terrible
way,
singer because
would
you
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 would
talked
you
about that.
believe would you believe that Sylvester Stallone is a terrible singer? Anyway,
I can't believe it.
okay, so we've got Shirley MacLaine who plays Louisa Weezer, Ouiser Boudreaux.
And I did not know that was short for Louisa until I was much older. They mention it very slightly
Yeah, they do.
later in the
They're not
movie,
very
but like
pronounced about it.
I didn't catch it, and I was just like, I thought they spelled it like Weezer, like the band. And I was like, why
Right.
are they calling this old woman Weezer? That just seems bizarre. But
Right. So she was in The Trouble with Harry, which was her first ever movie, and it's, as noted, my least favorite Alfred Hitchcock movie ever made.
hmm.
And she was in The Apartment, which was pretty solid. It's a Billy Wilder movie. And she was in Terms of Endearment. I know that you've got to have at least a couple others that you can think of that she was in.
Yeah, so most recently she was in Only Murders in the Building, which TV show
Oh,
on
yes.
Hulu. Really enjoy it.
Steve Martin,
She
and who else is in that with him?
Martin Short and
Martin
Selena
Short.
Gomez. And if you can
Okay.
get past Selena Gomez not moving her lips when she talks, it's enjoyable.
Okay.
And then before that, she was in Downton Abbey. She was Cora Grantham's mother, her American mother, in a few episodes.
Wow. Okay.
She's been in a ton of stuff, but
Oh, absolutely. She's been around a long time. So Julia Roberts plays the character Shelby Eatonton Latchery, and I have quite a few movies for Julia Roberts here, but Mystic Pizza, Pretty Woman, Sleeping with the Enemy, Hook, My Best Friend's Wedding, Conspiracy Theory, Stepmom, Notting Hill, Runaway Bride, Aaron Brockovich, Ocean's 11. I mean, all the Ocean's 11 movies, actually,
mhm.
and then Eat, Pray, Love. And I mean, I know that there are others, but in the interest of time, I think unless you have something that you major want to jump
Nope.
on. Okay, so Olympia Dukakis plays Clary, Clairee, and then Daryl Hannah plays Anel, who is just, I don't know Daryl Hannah. I don't, other than this movie, I have no frame of reference, and I've heard her name 1,000 times,
So she's in Splash with Tom Hanks. She
which I
plays
never
the
saw.
mermaid.
Yep.
She's in the Kill Bill movies. She looks completely freaking different.
Okay, that'd be
Um,
why.
yeah, she doesn't even look like the same person in my mind. Olympia Dukakis, I thought she was in Moonlighting with Cher.
Yeah, I think she was, and she was in Mr. Holland's Opus, which
Mm,
I recently
yeah,
recorded an episode on that I
yeah.
know you're not a fan of. So I guess getting right down to brass tacks, what do we have for a plot synopsis on this one?
All right, so this is about several women who are friends with each other. Dolly Parton's character Truvy runs hair salon, and they all kind of meet up there. Julia Roberts is the daughter of Sally Field's character, and she is diabetic. And the movie starts on her wedding day, and it's really focused on the relationship between these women, their support of each other, and getting through the difficulties, specifically with Shelby, Julia Roberts' character's diabetes. And what I really love about this movie is the one-liners throughout it.
Oh, absolutely. That's the
It
best part of this movie for
it
me.
I mean, I've probably seen it 100 times, and it still like had me laughing. And I started watching it, and I actually stopped it and made Dan watch it with me later because I was like, I know you've never seen this, but and he actually like was sorting cards or something at the table while he was watching, but I could hear him laugh a couple of times. So that's interesting. Couple of like major kind of plot things to think about here that are interesting. Every major scene takes place during a holiday. It starts Easter weekend when Shelby's wedding is, and there's a whole, kind of craziness with Shelby's wedding. And they're going to Truby's to get their hair done. You meet all of the characters through that and kind of get a sense of their backgrounds. So Sally Field works at counseling center. Olympia Dukakis is the former first lady of the town. So she's really involved in kind of the community, and she ends up buying a radio station later in the film. Shirley MacLaine is kind of the old curmudgeon who has been friends with Clary, Olympia Dukakis' character, most of their lives. But she's a jerk. She's terrible in a lot of ways, but got a good heart. Dolly Parton plays Truvy, who is the hairstylist who's married to Sam Shepard, whose name is Spud in the movie, another awesome name. He, kind of does like construction work and stuff, so he's constantly out of work, and so she's supporting him. Their son's a disaster. You have Daryl Hannah, who plays Annelle, who is hired the day of the wedding to work at Truvy's shop with her. Tom Skerritt plays Drum Eatonton, who's Sally Field's husband and Julia Roberts' father. Dylan McDermott plays Jackson, Julia Roberts' fiance, later husband. Another note of casting Janine Turner, who you may remember from Northern Exposure, who actually runs a thing called Constituting America that I've actually written for in the past. So neat connection. She plays Nancy Beth Marmillion, who is the niece of Clary, Olympia Dukakis' character, and she's crowned Miss Merry Christmas and ends up losing her crown because she and somebody were in a hotel room high and had her tinsel down around her knees is the line. So
I do want to mention that Tom Skerritt in a bucket, like a lime green bucket hat, is a real look. Like, it's quite the look.
Yeah, and he wears it at a few times.
Yeah, he does.
So he's funny because he's trying to get all the birds out of the trees because they're having the reception in their backyard. Sally Field and Tom Skerritt are having the reception in the backyard. There's all this stuff that is happening. It's going wrong the day of the wedding. Everything kind of goes okay. During that first kind of scene where you see all of them together, Shelby has too much insulin and she has an attack where she has to get juice and kind of go get her insulin levels back down. I understand that like there are huge problems if you don't have enough insulin or too much insulin, but I didn't know that like you'd react like that.
Yeah, I didn't realize that either.
It seems more of like it's not the physical reaction that makes sense, but like why like she's so adamant about fighting it. I guess I don't know. It was a really it's an intense scene, but it's really bizarre. Then you find out that Shelby can't have children because of her diabetes, and that she and Jackson got in a fight because she thinks that Jackson's throwing away his chance to have children if he marries her. They get married anyway. And, we flash forward 6-8 months to Christmas time. Shelby and Jackson come back into town. They're at the town festival. You see that Annelle has completely updated her look from the, dowdy, mousy glasses wearing to, having a new hairstyle and new clothes and wearing contacts and all of this sort of stuff. So you kind of see the change in her character. And then you find out that Shelby is pregnant, and you learn too that it wasn't that Shelby couldn't have children. It was that her doctor recommended that she shouldn't have children. And it's a really deep and emotional scene between Sally Field and Julia Roberts, because Sally Field is considering her own daughter and is saying, hey, this is going to be really hard on your body. You might not survive this. What are you doing? There are other options. Whereas Julia Roberts is saying, no judge is going to give a baby to somebody with my medical record, and I'd rather have 30 minutes of wonderful than a lifetime of nothing special. Having gone through fertility treatments and all of this sort of stuff, that kind of hit hit me a little bit. Whereas I actually thought like my decision was the opposite, right? Was like, well, this isn't working. And I want my life to be full overall. I don't want this to be the only thing that I'm relying on.
Right. Yeah.
So that's kind of an interesting, way to look at it now as an adult. Then flash forward, you get to Shelby has the baby. It's the 1 year birthday of the baby. So we're flashing forward quite a bit, which is on around the 4th of July. Shelby goes and gets her hair cut with Malin, gets it cut short so that she can, take care of the baby named Jack Jr. after his father. And they learn that Shelby's had dialysis because her kidneys are failing after having given birth. Again, did like there's these like kind of track marks up Shelby's arms from the dialysis. I didn't
Yeah.
know that was the case. I if is that true? I don't know.
I don't know. I'd never heard of that being like it looks pretty gnarly. I mean,
Right.
it's pretty aggressive.
So then you find out that Shelby has to have a kidney transplant and that her mother, Malin, is going to donate a kidney to her. Meanwhile, Truvy's husband Spud is still not working. Things aren't going well between them. Clary buys the radio station. She's doing, stuff with that and kind of getting things going. Annelle is dating guy she met at Shelby's wedding, and they're getting married soon. And then Shirley MacLaine Weezer is starting to date a guy she went to high school with. So, kind of background sort of stuff, but the main focus of the plot is on Malin and Shelby and their relationships. Next part is Halloween time. This is when Annelle and her boyfriend Sammy are getting married. So they throw her a shower, like a monster motif shower. Shelby can't make it. She's working. And then you see Shelby at home getting Jack Jr. ready for Halloween. So she's dressed him up in his costume. You can tell she starts to feel bad and collapses. And when her husband Jackson gets home, the pots are boiling over. She's laying on the floor with the phone next to her off the hook, and the baby's screaming and crying. And then she is in a coma and in the hospital. Her mother never leaves her side the entire time. And spoiler alert, they end up removing her from life support and she passes away. And epic scene at the funeral where her mother, talks
She's
through. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say she's kind of trying to understand why this has happened and how she can look at it, as anything but a horrible thing, basically. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
she just keeps going and I mean she's angry, she's rightfully angry, she's very sad, she's so upset, and I mean it's
Yeah, and everybody's crying. You're crying as the viewer. The all the women standing at the grave are crying, and Clary, because one of the lines is that Sally Field says is, "I just want to hit somebody. I want to hit somebody until they feel as bad as I do." And Clary pushes Weezer in front of her and says, "Here, hit this. We'll sell T-shirts that say I." Smacked Weezer Boudreaux, and it makes everybody laugh and kind of
okay.
breaks the tension. And you learn that Annelle is pregnant and she's going to name the baby Shelby because that's how she and her husband met. And that kind of, then at the end of the movie, they're at Easter again, kind of full circle. And Annelle goes into labor and everybody runs off to get her to the hospital.
Okay, so I have a couple of notes to add here, really quick. First off, at the end of the movie, I see that I think it's Shelby's son running, and he's got like a little bow tie on,
Mm-hmm.
and I've never thought like if somebody's not wearing a tuxedo, I have never looked at somebody wearing a bow tie and thought looking good, like I never once thought that. I always thought it looked stupid to have a
I
bow
think
tie on.
you live in the Midwest, and I think of where I live in Virginia as the South, but most Southern people do not. but bow ties are a bigger thing in the South.
Oh, okay. I guess that makes sense. I got a couple of quotes I'd like to.
Yes, me too.
So Dolly Parton's character Truvy says early on in the movie, "I used to have one," referring to an alarm clock, "but I slammed it against the wall when I couldn't figure out where the batteries went. But I know now I was suffering from premenstrual syndrome." And then I'll one I really liked was it was very applicable to life throughout is it'll be pretentious, and Daddy always said an ounce of pretension is worth a pound of manure, which is fucking great. Like I just really like that quote. What you got some over there? You said.
Yeah, so Shelby finds a box of condoms in the closet that she learns her brothers are going to decorate her getaway car for the wedding in, and Malin yells out at them, "Don't you decorate your sister's car with condoms? It's tacky." Like she screams this across the neighborhood, right? Like it's
Right,
not.
exactly.
There's a another one when Truvy and Annelle are first meeting. Truvy, Dolly Parton says, I live by this philosophy. There's no such thing as natural beauty. Just look at me, Annelle. It takes some effort to look like this." I use the term "his coffee kicked in" quite a bit. You
Oh yeah.
see Drum run into the house like he's gonna shit his pants and grab a piece of the newspaper, and when Malin comes in to look for him, the kids say, "Oh, his coffee kicked in." Another one of Drum's one-liners that I liked was when Weezer comes over with her dog, who now has a nervous condition because Drum keeps shooting to try to get rid of all the birds in the house or around the house, and it's freaking Weezer's dog out. And she's taken the dog to the vet, and the vet's name is Whitey Black, which I thought was weird. But Drum says, "Whitey Black is a moron. I'm not sure he even has opposable thumbs." That was a good
That's
one.
pretty solid. So one thing about like the line at the end of this movie where Sally Field says, "I find it amusing. Men are supposed to be made out of steel or something," and obviously that's like the title of the movie, Steel Magnolias. But the way our mother always pronounced this movie's name when we were younger, and I don't know why. Maybe it was because I didn't have a frame of reference for the flower, but she would say it Magnolias, like
Oh. I think
ISS at the end. Like it
I
didn't
think
make any sense.
I yeah, I think it's just one of those, like apostrophe
Yeah, right.
things. She just
There's a lot of things my mom says that I call her on a lot. So,
Yeah. So, I was gonna say too, now having lived in the South, we had a magnolia tree at our last house, and I'm quite sure that magnolias don't bloom around Easter. They bloom at really, really random times, but
oh,
one of the scenes is that they're putting in the early movie, which is supposed to be around Easter, they're taking magnolias and throwing them in the pool so that that looks nice. And Weezer says, "Did
right,
you get those magnolias out of my tree?" And Drum says, "The judge hasn't decided whose tree that is yet." So obviously there's, in case you hadn't figured it out, Drum and Weezer have a kind of rivalry going on.
right.
So it's really funny. I go back and forth between these two movies as to which one's my favorite. Right now, Steel Magnolias is actually my favorite of the two, and I think it really is the dialogue for me.
Yeah,
The story for Fried Green Tomatoes is better, but I really like the dialogue, and I think there's just a lot of very witty things, and it shows women in a light that like they can be funny and they can be crass and in ways that you don't see very often, and kind of shows that mother daughter relationship of arguing but loving each other, and then the power of friendship too.
right. Yeah, I mean, I would say the one-liners in this movie rule all, and then I mean, obviously the performances are really good.
Mhm.
The characters are very well developed. I mean, all in all, I had a good time watching this movie. I really did. It was obviously you get toward the end, and there's a lot of serious stuff going on, and it's not very lighthearted anymore, and it's
Mhm.
just kind of the way it's got to be. And but I really did enjoy it. I thought it was really good. This one I had definitely not seen every scene of, because I
Mhm.
only knew that Shelby died at the end. I did
Oh,
not know that, like, I didn't know how it happened. Like, I knew she
so
died. What's that?
this is the thing, and I think I mentioned this to you in the recent past, where our dad would always say, "Oh yeah, Steel Magnolias, that's the one where Julia Roberts has cancer." And I'm like, "No, dad, she doesn't have cancer, she's diabetic." "Oh, right, 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 but then she gets cancer." "No, dad, she never has cancer, she's always a diabetic." That, like,
I
he just
like
never.
I really like that distinction that he makes, where you would say, no, she doesn't have cancer, she's a diabetic. And he says, oh, right, but she's a diabetic and she gets cancer.
Right.
As if you wouldn't say, no, dad, she's a diabetic that gets cancer. It's like, oh,
Right.
goodness
Another
gracious.
another good quote that I forgot to mention is, "I'm not crazy, I've just been in a very bad mood for 40 years."
Right. That one's a solid what's her Shirley MacLaine
Yep.
one. And you know what they say, if you don't have anything nice to say about anybody, come
"Come
sit
sit
by
by me."
me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I don't know, as your kind of first full run through, what we're obviously, like you said, it gets heavy, but I do like that they kind of break that with the laughter and comedy, but not in a slapstick sort of way, I guess.
Right. Yeah. No, I
It
agree with
seems
that.
like it could legitimately happen.
Right.
It's very realistic, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I would say that it was very well delivered on my first run through. It is pretty solid. But we do have casting notes. First one, Meg Ryan was initially under contract to play Shelby, but the producers let her out of it to play Sally in When Harry Met Sally. I love When Harry Met Sally. I know you don't feel as strongly about it as I do, but I'm
It's
glad
alright.
that the stars
Oh,
aligned.
absolutely. I think Julia Roberts made more sense for this movie, and Meg Ryan made more sense for When Harry Met Sally, right? Like,
Right, right.
just
And Winona Ryder
oh,
was
Jesus
originally
Christ.
offered the role of Shelby. Although the producers were charmed by Ryder, they had ultimately considered her too young for the part, which good call, producers, because I don't think that was the real reason you didn't want to have Winona Ryder. But so a little bit of trivia. Sally Field and Shirley MacLaine said in an interview that Herbert Ross was very difficult to work with, telling the main lead actresses that they couldn't act, and singling out Julia Roberts in particular, to the point that she was left in tears. Apparently Ross's wife had died in 1987, and that had something to do with it, but I'm like, I think that
So
that's kind of
he's
like a thing to blame it on. Like, I don't think that that's a real reason to
yeah.
treat somebody like shit.
Well, and it across the board, right? And you've got some pretty high caliber actors here, even if this
Right.
is a very early role for Julia Roberts. Like, you've got Sally Field, Shirley MacLaine, Olivia Dukakis. Like, they're nothing to.
No, right.
And I read something somewhere where apparently he said something similar to Dolly Parton, like, "Oh, you can't act." And like, she wasn't an actor, right? Like, she's gotten better over the years, right? But like, I
Right.
think she does a decent job in this movie, but she tells him, "Yeah, that's why you're here, to make it seem like I can act,"
Right,
which I thought was a
exactly.
pretty good response. Like,
Yeah, it
make a
sounds like a
good
very
movie and it
Dolly
won't.
Parton
Right,
response. I mean,
right. She's not where she is today for not
for
doing
nothing.
some of that.
Right. So the original play has no onstage roles for men. The characters spend a great deal of time talking about men and their lives, but no male characters even appear on stage
It
or
doesn't
ever
surprise
appear.
me there wasn't. I mean, honestly, it's very minimal that the men are in
Right, and you could see them
anyway.
lifting right out and just having
Yeah,
more scenes where they're talking about what the men are doing than
but I
actually seeing
understand
it.
too that, like, for a movie, it would be really weird to not have them. Like, if you're in a stage play, right? Like, you've got one set, they're probably mostly in the hair salon. So that makes sense.
Right.
But yeah, uh,
Yeah. So I guess, I mean, unless you got anything else, I can run into the info and ratings stuff.
let's do it.
All right. So runtime 118 minutes, budget $15 million, worldwide gross $96.8 million, IMDb rating 7.3, Rotten Tomato Critics score 68%, Rotten Tomato audience score 89%, personal rating 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I'm assuming you're a 5 out of 5.
I am. Why? So of these, like what was missing from them that made you a 4.5 instead of a 5 or lower?
I hate to say this because it's gonna sound bad, but it's like a gut thing. Like
Mhm.
I just kind of feel, or I felt as I think the worst part about the movies for me is I'll be honest with you, I would have given them 5 out of 5 stars, but I had them so ruined for me. And like I didn't get to get the real storytelling. You know what I mean? Like I love to go into a movie where I don't know what the
Yeah.
fuck's gonna happen. And it's like if I go into Steel Magnolias and I already know this chick that's having a diabetic fit is gonna die before the end of the movie, it takes something away from me. You know what I mean? It's just like there's anticipation building, and it's not anybody's fault, but my mom's. But so
Well, I don't
I
know
mean,
why your 5-year-old self didn't sit down and watch these movies.
yeah, I don't either. It's very perplexing, but
Um,
yeah.
I was surprised that you didn't do them in order of release. But that's just
So
my OCD.
usually you'll find that the movie I talk about first is the one I have the most to say about.
Okay.
And I had way more because, like, aside from like the one-liners and stuff, the plot was a little more one-dimensional in Steel Magnolias,
Mm-hmm.
and so it was a little less difficult to dive into. And so I figured, okay, I'll lead off with fried green tomatoes and see where that takes us. And it
Yeah.
took us into an hour and 25 minutes.
True. True. And then
So
this is, much shorter, so that makes sense.
exactly. Right. So, but yeah, I guess I mean I appreciate you coming on the show and gabbing about these chick flicks.
Yeah,
Really
happy
appreciate it.
to join. Happy to be your first guest, and looking forward to seeing where you go in the future and joining again in the future as well.
Absolutely. Be happy to have you. All right. So, and I think that's all we got. Have a good day.
Bye, all.
Bye. Brandon at Random Reviews is performed, written, directed, produced, and edited by Brandon Griffiths. Theme music is performed by Augusto Diniz from Fiverr.